Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. Full goon squad in the house.
Yo.
It is week 3 of phase 1 at misfitathletics.com. Discord is bumping. If you're looking for a place to share scores with other Misfits, talk to the Misfit coaches, talk to each other, find those virtual training partners, you can create a free account. You don't even have to have a Misfit Athletics account. It'd be kind of weird if you didn't. But discord.gg/Misfit Athletics. Create your account, go in there. There is a community chat channel. Click on that. Let us know you're there. Let us know where you're from, what program you're following, all that good stuff, and then jump right in. A lot of frequently asked questions get taken care of in there, and just a good place to suffer with other people, I think. Gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for you.
I don't know if I'm ready to answer. We'll see.
This is based on, Operation 21-15-9 is underway. Sherb is officially trying to qualify for the 2023 35 to 39 age group semifinals.
Accurate.
Is that accurate?
That is accurate. That's the goal. That's the objective.
So my question for you first is, how is that going so far? And what sort of shift is there physically, mentally, whatever, going from you spent your whole life with a lot of your identity being athlete, you had sort of a period of time where you really had to sink into business and family, and now you're trying to find, I guess the first question is just, how does it feel to feel like there's maybe a bit more extra purpose in there?
Tired. To be honest, I'm pretty tired. Honestly, it's fun to get back, and having more of a purpose in training is something that Hunter and I have talked kind of extensively about in the past, like trying to keep the balance between, when I didn't have this objective of trying to qualify for semifinals, the balance of, I want to make sure I'm a good leader in the community and kind of like practice what I preach. I take the classes. I try to follow the instruction the coaches given in our classes, try to hit the stimuli, try to create camaraderie in the gym. And I think that was really important. And I really do like that there's still an element of that in what I'm doing right now. But there's a different layer to training when you have an objective or a goal that I think was missing for a long time, because for the longest time, it was just like, basically don't become so unfit that you get beat by the majority of affiliate class members, or you feel like you're not holding up your end of the bargain, or you're not giving the same effort that you would ask one of your affiliate members to take. So, the accountability early on, but when I didn't have this objective, it was like, oh shit, I don't really feel like going heavy today on the back squat. I'll just do technique work today, or I'll do speed work instead, as opposed to, maybe trying to see what I actually can reach to for a potential. So it's just nice now to have a purpose. So now it's kind of thinking about the things that I'm not very good at, and you've been helping me with this quite a bit, and just creating a little bit more of a, hey, there's a reason you're doing this, not just like exercise is fun, because I'm someone that would work out regardless if I had a goal or not. But it is more fun to me, even on the mornings when I'm getting up at like 5:45, to get like 30 or 45 minutes of exercise in before my kid gets up, and the morning routine starts for like the family, getting stuff going. It's much easier to do those things when you have a bigger goal in mind, as opposed to just like, well, I'm kind of sore, it's kind of rainy outside. Like this morning, it was cold. It was like cold relative to the last couple of days here. Rainy. Crickets in our house chirping everywhere, and I was just like, fuck. If I
in your house?
Oh yeah. In our basement, there's crickets everywhere. Like,
right.
I don't know what's going on downstairs in our basement, but there's a shitload of crickets. But you get up in the I know. Well, no, they were like, but
at MF Sherb on Instagram if you have cricket tips.
Cricket tips.
Slide into those DMs with your cricket tips.
But when you have an objective like trying to qualify for something, it's much easier to convince yourself to get up and do it. And don't get me wrong, there are still mornings where it's drudgery at first. It's, put your shoes on, put the music in your ears, and you start assault biking at 86 watts. And you're like, why am I awake right now? But within 2 minutes, it's like, all right, it's go time. I'm good to go. And I've found developed a rhythm now of how I want to start those days, and nice enough that I can do a decent amount of my training on the weekends. So the stress of the weekend work, I'm still trying to make sure I'm getting all the other stuff that I need to get done, is much easier now that I can push some of that on the weekend. So I think that the conversations you and I have had about how to schedule things and creating priorities and getting better at separating my identity of when you're an athlete, you're all in and you can't do anything else, really makes you, kind of selfish, and something I didn't really subscribe to early on. And I could catch myself being like that. So now, with the wife, with a kid, with a, 2 gyms, training company, protein company, all these things. It's really easy to have a lot of stuff going on. So being smart about how you plan the week has made a big difference. So, feels very different from, I don't know, a handful of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, when we were trying to get either myself back to regionals when that was a thing or on a team. So far it's going well. I still think there's going to be a decent amount of kind of figuring out on the fly. Like I was telling you the other day, like, you know, higher intensity stuff first thing in the morning really doesn't go all that well. Like our Metcon test was like shuttle runs, farmers lunges, and GHDs. And it was a real sad morning that morning. But, you know, I at the end of the day, there are going to be days where you can really push and if things feel good, and some days where, like, I don't want to say check boxes, but you kind of get up and you get something done. And even though it may not be your absolute best effort, it's still better than having slept in and then been regretting it later on. Like, I should have just got myself out of bed and gone and done it. So overall, I'm getting into the flow of it, but it's a little bit of shaking off the cobwebs and rust. That's been kind of rough.
Yeah, I think the two things that come to mind, first one is if people are in a similar scenario, the first time that you come to me and say, this piece, I just didn't have it, I wasn't able to go there, it is so easy for me after doing this for so long to just delete that thing in the next week and put the note in the cell next to it pointing to that sort of single thing that you're going to go hard on in the day and be like, there it is. It's circled. It's the thing that you're going to go in, and you're just putting more eggs into that basket than you normally would. And, you know, I had a theory about how this would work for Kenzie a few years ago, something similar, and it paid off. And then really the other thing is just your realization that you do better maybe 4 days a week training with virtual training partners, knowing, hey, this is maybe the overall score that I'm trying to get, or this is what people are getting, but not being roped into somebody else's strategy within the actual Metcon in person. So that's kind of to me, kind of a unique scenario. And I think another thing athletes can think a little bit about is if I'm always getting roped into somebody else's strategy or my ego takes over, I don't want to put myself on an island and have no fucking clue what is good for this. We talked about it in the last episode. You know, hurting a little bit is not a metric. It's going to be every single day. You're all machines. It always hurts. So for you to be able to realize, hey, there's a lot of days where I got to do this conditioning piece alone. But in the back of your head, you know what it's supposed to be. You know what the time domain is. You already probably have some scores. But going through the rounds and your transitions and everything is a bit more personalized because maybe Hunter's not a little bit ahead and you're like, fuck it, I'm going for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest change is understanding that you don't need to just like sell your soul on every single piece. I think that's something the earlier version of myself did. I like to race a lot. Like, ego is definitely a thing in training, and you know, I'd rather have specific objectives that apply to me directly than just like try to win. And I still think that competing is a good way to push intensity, but it still needs to be relative to what you need to work on. So like, for example, yesterday you gave me, been flipping what you all do for running, I do as rowing, and whatever you do as rowing, I do as running. So we'd flip them back and forth. So one of the things I had to do yesterday was 4x1K row. And historically, I've just been told to do that with the rest that I had. The first one would be pretty quick. Second one would be probably a little bit slower. Third one would be shitty. And then the fourth one, I had to see whatever I had left. And instead having instructions on how to pace things correctly and having a little bit more context for how things are going allows me to get a good stimulus, but not to just, you know, ruin myself for the rest of the day. So like, one of the things I'm trying to hold myself accountable for specifically on machines is that, like, I know I can game it and get a better split. I know I can start fast and I can end fast. And if I suffer a little bit in the middle, like, I'll still have a good split overall. And if you post it on Discord, it looks good, but that's not really good training. What I need to be better at is being more deliberate through the entire piece. And that goes not just for machines. You can make an argument for an AMRAP or 5 rounds for time. Like, right. You know, the one that thing pops out was right before camp. We had the Team Misfit benchmark for the phase, which is 40, 30, 20 bar facing burpee wall ball. And you give me specific instructions to dog the first 40 burpees, which I tried to do, but it's probably still a little too quick for that.
It's not that easy to dog burpees when you're fresh, because you feel like you're dogging them and then you're like, wow, shit.
And you look at the clock, you're like 2 minutes in, you're like, shit, I just did 20 a minute for 2 minutes.
Wow. I don't know what that's like, but yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then you told me to do force to 10 wall balls, and like, normally a wall ball's movement, I like, you know, rest of my laurels, and I'm like, cool, I can just do 40 wall balls. It's like taking a nap. And not everyone feels that way, but I like wall balls. You said do 4x10. So I did 10, drop, 10, drop, 10, drop, 10, drop. And then off to the races, see what you have at that point. And I think that was really good instruction. And I do think I still potentially pushed the first 40 and 40 a bit too much. So, one of the things I have in my notes is next time it comes around, be a little bit slower for the 40 and 40 and see if you can get a better overall time, because you can push the 30 and the 20 a little bit harder. And historically, that's not how I would do a workout. I would go as fast as I can through 40 and 40.
Right.
And then who the fuck knows what happens after that. And that's just not good training. So I do think there's a level of maturity and understanding stimuli a bit more, as, been both coaching and training myself for so long now and having help from other people, that's making the training just, more efficient. So I don't feel like I need to do like I used to feel, which is like do 4 or 5 things a day. And most of them are like 80% and still get a lot of adaptation, but waste, quote unquote, a lot of time in the gym just doing extra things, when if you were just focused and doing fewer things better, you get an overall better stimulus, which is what I think I'm doing now.
How's the balance been with training and like home life specific? Like home life's more so. But
yeah, I mean, overall so good. One of the things that
so good.
Yeah. So. No, it's going pretty well. I think the thing I've been trying to do best is making sure that I prioritize when my kid is napping. That's a training window for me. And some days that's going to be 2 hours, and some days that's going to be an hour, or maybe it's even 45 minutes. So I started first, before I even got to the point of training, talking to my wife about it and, telling her that I'm trying to do this, and that means I'm training a little bit more. But I was very specific about 2 things. I'm not going to sacrifice work, and I'm not going to sacrifice time spent with you guys. So, like, for example, before we had camp, I had a full training docket for the rest of the week, and then I didn't get to everything because camp was my priority. I want to make sure that people who are coming to our camp are getting the full camp experience. So it's like, you know what? I'll try to sneak toes to bar in at lunch, or maybe I'll do some back rack lunges at lunch, and that's going to be my fitness for the day. And then some days that's going to be okay. That's all you get to, but that's what I did. And
Young Sherb would have been in like a Rocky sweatsuit running down the middle of the road.
I would have been fidgeting during lectures.
2 a.m.
Yeah. So that was one thing. And then, making sure with the family stuff, that it's very deliberate. I'm going to get up a little bit early, so it's before everyone's awake, and it's not, sacrificing, maybe that's making breakfast or, playing with cars on the fucking carpet in the living room. Like, I'm not going to miss that time with my kids. So get up early, get a little bit done, go into work for the day, or if it's the weekend, hang out with him until nap time, and then I'll get another little spurt in the afternoon for an hour and a half or 2. I find that most days I can get all of what I need to get done in about 2 hours at the absolute most. And some days, if I have a little extra time, maybe I'll take something from later in the week because I have a little bit of extra gas in my tank and I can put it there for the day. And then some days it's like, I'm going to take one thing out and maybe hopefully get to it on the weekend. But I think the biggest change is not getting too wrapped up in the idea that if you miss one thing, like the week's gone, it's trash. Like, I think there's not a
What's
pass or
worse,
fail.
missing something because it's appropriate to miss it, or forcing yourself to do it and not getting very much out of it?
Yeah, forcing is my old mentality. We'd be like, all right, I'm going to make this, square peg on the round hole and see what happens. And, I'd rather do few things better. And I find that that's how it's starting right now. And that's my goal, to kind of continue that throughout the entire year. And, there'll be days where I have to get up early, or I have to go late in my training when it's outside of normal family windows. But, Noel's been really understanding. So I think as of right now, it's going well, but we are only 3 weeks in. So I'm just trying to be cautious of getting too excited about that and trying to go all the way back to the direction I was before too much. But, understanding that I'm still sort of let my body catch up to like the stimuli, because I haven't trained this hard in a long time, and my body's going to be pretty sore, and you're going to feel good for the first couple of weeks. It's actually a conversation I had with one of my remote clients about the deadlift. Talking about the pull the heavy single and do your 6-5-4-2 or, whatever like that. And I said, listen, you're a phenomenal deadlifter. You should put very little stock in pulling a super heavy single ahead of your session, not because it's not good to be able to do that, but because think about what that drains from your battery for the rest of the week, and then the weeks after that and the weeks after that, and kind of seeing the big picture down the road. So that's something I've told him, and then I think back to myself and say, all right, how do I take that same concept and apply it to me? And that means that some days I'm not going to get to everything, but if I can get more consistent training throughout the year, because I allow myself to have a little bit of ebbs and flows, I'll probably have a much more successful training season, and overall will be fitter for, even if I do miss a piece here and there, and then on some days maybe add one extra piece because I felt like, this is something that's a priority. I just couldn't do it on Tuesday when I was busy with work.
Top secret behind the scenes, that single is a warm-up.
What?
Forced warm-up. It's also data collection. I like the idea of a high-level athlete knowing how long, literally in minutes, it takes me to go from 135 to 405, whatever it is. But it's a forced warm up.
Also kind of
You're
like
going to see it. You're going to see a lot of that throughout the year.
I was say I also like it for a little bit of like a CNS check-in. Like if the barbell feels a little bit heavier, maybe that's a good sign that you haven't spent the time you need recovering after
But
pieces.
that's data from a warm-up, right?
Yeah. So again, I like to use those type of things. You know, we have the heavy single ahead of the speed work too. Like you're working up and, you know, last week you hit 90%, no problem. And you get to 80 this week and you're like, oh, this kind of sucks. Like, oh, did you warm up correctly? Did you cool down correctly the day before? How's your nutrition been? Have you been sleeping? There are, you know, things that can be brought to your mind and be like, all right, what element of my life hasn't been taken care of that is now causing me to feel worse this week relative to last week? Like, you know, this morning I did the speed back squats and last week they fucking killed me. They really did. I was toast. And today I spent a little bit more time being deliberate with my warm up, knowing I was going to only do that first thing this morning, and they went significantly better. So it was a good reminder to like, hey, take your time and don't rush through things.
Yeah, Luca's on Texas Method currently, and for him, the idea of 1x5 as like a training session was like a little weird. So I sent over the back squat warm up protocol and was just like, I'm talking the full machine, the activate, all of it, all the way through. And he's just like, you feel completely different at that point when you go to do that set of 5. And it's like, okay, where else does this concept apply to my training? Because we've all had those workouts where we don't do what we're supposed to do and our body's essentially in shock at the beginning. And it's like, oh shit, we're in for it. Or one of those days where like you're doing, you know, squat cleans or squat snatches and just everything is sticky and it just doesn't feel right and it's off. Pretty good chance the warm up wasn't dialed in.
I'm encouraged to see that in Discord too. There have been plenty of people who've either came to camp for quarterfinals or for summer camp, or have friends that came to one of those two camps. And a lot of that's been what they've been chirping about in their, you know, distinct program channels is like, hey, really did the deliberate full warm up today. Yeah. And I only did the deadlift and the accessory. That's all I did was warm up really well, deadlift, and then accessory. Didn't get to the conditioning today, but I felt awesome during the things that I did do. It's like, that is great. That is good training for the day. Now, don't always skip your conditioning, but if it's, you know, a once in a while thing and you're like, you know what, I'm going to really pour intensity into one thing, it's nice to see that that's becoming more widely accepted instead of trying to, you know, fit 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag.
Other side of the coin here, and I want to go over this for 2 reasons. One, because I'm fascinated with sort of the opposite of my own mindset. And then I think there are a lot of people out there that are in Hunter's situation just like they are in yours. So I gravitate towards you talking about like having that goal, that thing. I can train as much as I need to if I have that thing. If I don't have that thing, I really struggle with what's the structure, what's the point, why am I doing this? The carrot of like, I'm going to die when I'm 83 and like every 6,000 workouts I do adds a year, whatever, that's challenging. I'm like coming around to it for sure. But Hunter, I know that people in your sort of mindset don't always have the easiest way of explaining it, but you don't have the shiny object that often, that thing out there, and you still take your training pretty seriously. I'm sure it ebbs and flows, but from outside looking in, it really does look like you care a lot about your training. You're hitting different energy systems. I mean, I know you're a CrossFit coach. I know you want to put yourself through the paces, but like, is there a way for you to translate a bit to the listeners of like just getting after it because?
I think there's a couple of things. One there's definitely some ego. Like I'll tell people like I don't care about my score, and for the most part that's true, but there's still the ego of like if I started seeing myself fall down like the affiliate leaderboard, that's the one that I use for the most part, then I might start asking myself like, what am I doing? Because I like winning. Yeah. So straight up. But I've also become a lot more interested in like kind of the how much adaptation can you get from how little. So basically like minimum effective dose. And a lot of that's been like since I would say more so since we've started introducing the Maffetone stuff more like intensely to the community.
Yeah.
I've become more interested in kind of learning how more from like a traditional energy system perspective, how things work and how we can like optimize like any given training session. And I think there's also the element of like kind of putting the importance back on warming up really well, cooling down really well. And people in Discord have said this too. And at summer camp, they're just like, are you guys expecting me to do every single warm-up protocol for every single training piece? Because that's crushing, like that's a lot of time.
Sure.
And it's like, I'm sure we'll get into that on this episode, but the point is it's like, okay, well, basically like do less better and see what happens. And it's seems to be working reasonably well for me. So it's almost like how little there's an element of pride, like how little can I do and still be, very fit. But I think there's also the element of like, the amount of time that I've spent training and doing, like, I've always taken like hey, move well, learn how to move really well, taken that seriously, like work on the things that you're not very good at. And I think you can do a whole lot with like that kind of mentality, just attacking the things that make you a little bit uncomfortable, the things that you've identified. For me, it's like, we've talked about it in when like the open time frame, when there's a very muscular gassy kind of workout. Like I know that if I go past a certain point in this workout, I'm going to be in the hurt locker.
Yeah.
And when it comes to competing, like I'm trying to game that as best as I can. But when it comes to training, Sherb and I were doing some biking intervals, and it was like, this is that kind of anaerobic lactate threshold work that I will benefit a lot from. And I just kind of poured my eggs into that basket for the day. And that was basically I think that was the only training piece that I did. So, there's still an element of pride.
But you can feel that stress response. You can feel that stimulus. You can feel it in the moment. You can feel it when you're trying to watch TV at night and your fucking eyelids are closing. And I think there's proof of concept in that. Like, I can take an effort that someone would spread across this many pieces and go put it into this one thing. And
the effort thing is it as well. Like there are plenty of days where I'm like, man, exercise is a checkbox for me. It's like, did I do it? Yes. Okay. I've got other things that I need to do. But like, if it is going to be one of those days, I do try to just put the intensity in for that piece. Like if I say I'm going to, like, again, bike intervals, we're doing 8 of them. It's like, this is a 45-minute piece. The only thing I'm going to do today, like, I'm feeling sad come interval 3 and 4 out of 8. That's just like, fuck. But you're halfway in it. Like, you're getting the adaptation. You've used your athlete IQ brain. Like I picked the correct pace for me, like just happened to kind of nail it right on the head. And it was like, that was plenty of adaptation for me for the day. So I know that I still improved fitness relative to me, but I didn't need to spend 3-4 hours training, doing all this crazy training. Cause I'll also, like, there's an element of, if I'm exercising too much, quote unquote, then that obviously means that time is like, if I'm not spent working or doing something else and I'm spending that time training, then it's like, I will start to feel guilty about that. And I don't like, that makes me more stressed than like missing a training piece or something like that. So, I definitely don't want to come off as like not caring about performing well, because I do, but it's definitely more of a,
well, there's probably something to that, right? You are insanely consistent over a longer period of time.
I think
and not hitting the high highs and the low lows all the fucking time.
Yeah,
probably makes that a lot easier.
I think that's a lot.
Did you start training like pretty young too, before a lot of your peers?
Like I started lifting weights in high school because I was like,
but it wasn't like you were just like sliding into this huge group of people doing it. You sort of took it on your own.
My own. I was like, I'm interested in like lifting. I made JV hockey as a sophomore, which isn't great for somebody who wants to be like potentially play in college. And I was like, this is bullshit and it was for a variety of reasons, but it was like, this is bullshit. I'm going to start exercising. And it turned out like as a sophomore in high school, there aren't too many people who are willing to like put in a lot of additional work in order to make those. True. In order to make, because we have got a lot of talented people, and I just wasn't especially skilled, but I knew how to work hard, and the training paid off. But I think the consistency over a really long period of time is there's a lot to be said about that, because I I think aside from really like the week or two a year where I'm either surfing or do it like on vacation or something, like I rarely go multiple days without training. And that could be a maffetone session. Like, and I consider like maffetone session, that's a training day for me. That's not necessarily recovery. One lifting session at the affiliate, like that's training, but it's consistent. It's probably been consistently at least 5, probably closer to 6, sometimes 7 days a week for like literally a decade, maybe 2. So I think there's a lot to be said about that for people who are, you know, kind of taking that low trajectory to a distant horizon sort of mindset, and you gain a lot from that.
Yeah, I think the potential for reverse engineering this situation, if someone's listening and they maybe identify more with needing that thing, is, you know, the quote that we always used to use with the Misfit Project stuff, the chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they're too strong to be broken. So this idea of setting out some sort of timeline for yourself and be like, I am going to train 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 2 months or 3 months, whatever it is. And I'm not going to set these like lofty expectations for what that is, but I am going to show up 5 days a week for this period of time. And these things just become part of your routine, what you do. And it's not this like, are you having a conversation with yourself daily? Am I really going to go? Am I going to do this? If you remove that conversation, that stress goes away. You don't feel like you even need to have it anymore. There's a lot that can be said about just starting with consistency and then building onto that.
It's funny you say that, because when you first sent me over what I was going to be doing for the very first week of training, I looked at it and I was like, oh, there are some things like absolutely, I can absolutely do some of these things. And then other days I'm like, how the hell am I going to fit all of these things into one day and do every other, you know, objective that I'm trying to accomplish for a day? And when I sat down and looked at the entire day, it was very overwhelming. But then what I convinced myself to do is like, do the first thing. Great. You did that. You got something of it. Do you have a little more time? Great. Do the second thing. Great. Do the third thing. Great. And then next thing I know, I was through a full day. And I was like, oh, it really wasn't that bad. But when I looked at it the first thing in the morning, I'm like, holy fuck, there's no way I'm going to do anything else besides this today, which is so far away from what I want this to be while I'm still trying to achieve this goal. And I started to realize that if I start to really go big picture with it and look at the entire week, it'd be very overwhelming. But rather, let's focus on this first thing. Let's do this first thing with this objective once. Great. And then I slowly started over the last couple of weeks. And so again, it's only been 3 weeks, but it's starting to become much more easy to understand that, like, yeah, you need to pour a lot of focus and it's going to take some time to do these things, but your initial reaction of making this a bigger deal than it has to be is basically going to paralyze you to the point where you don't do anything. So let's just do the first thing, get it done, and be okay with the fact that you might have to move a math session was going to be on the same day as some other training to a rest day, or, you know, maybe all of a sudden you got more done the front half of your week than you thought you were going to have done, and now you have a little extra time on a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday to fit these things in. And I think people need to be a little bit more, I don't know, accepting or a little bit more okay
flexible
with how things can be fluid in their training. Like you just said, like, I'm only going to give myself this one thing, and you know, actually, oh cool, I actually have another 45 minutes that I didn't always have. Let me do my rehab stuff, or let me spend some time in a handstand hold, because last time I, you know, did a muscular overload piece with my arms over my head with a dumbbell, I kept putting the dumbbell down. So there are clever ways to get through this stuff, but if you try to get started and you're like, there's 12,000 things on my agenda, you're probably just going to stare at that piece of paper and put yourself further behind the 8 ball than just going, all right, let's see what I can get done right now. And if I have more time, great, I'll do some more. And if not, maybe it'll fit later in the week.
I think the benefit to both of our, or really all 3 of ours, but our 2 situations is that there's a lot of experience with it, both like teaching people as athletes and just like having trained doing CrossFit for so long. I think there's obviously a lot to be said about having a certain baseline. It's not like you were going from 0 to like competitor, right? You're still, you still performing at a very high level, just having a concrete goal now to work towards. But having kind of the experience and being comfortable enough in your kind of with your own knowledge, with your own, I guess, training age to say like, yeah, today's today, like I can't fit this in, or like I can move this piece here, I can move that there. And we tell people this all the time, especially if you have access to the week in advance. It's like, that's what it's for. It's like, so that you can move those things around. It's less important that, we're mindful of what training pieces go where on what day. You're not going to do toes to bar in a Metcon, and toes to bar is skill work, but that doesn't mean you can't move things around a little bit to accommodate your training. And then also the being comfortable knowing that some days are not going to feel great. Like I did a Maffetone session yesterday. That was my training, and it was hot out, so like the environment played a role, but I was like 30 or 40 watts lower than I usually am. Like I was really slow. And at one point I was like, what's happening? Like, why is this the case? And it was just like, nope, that's fine. I did like yesterday wasn't like the Monday I wasn't like fully recovered. I didn't feel like phenomenal. I'm just like, the checkbox is the thing today. And like the next time I do this, I know it's not like I lost the equivalent of 40 watts of fitness on my Maffetone stuff. It's just like, that's what it is today. The fact is, like, I got this done.
Your heart does not know any better.
Yeah, your heart doesn't know. It's just beating, it's beating at whatever it's beating at.
150 watts?
Yeah.
Get off the bike.
PR for me.
Bump.
So
Loser, bump.
but having the experience and the training age to know and be comfortable with, like, I might have a bad day. I might have a bad week. I might have a shitty month. But like across the entire span of that whole duration, like the trend line is still moving in the right direction.
Yep. All right, Misfits, just a quick break to shout out our show sponsors and hopefully save you a little bit of money on our favorite products. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Proper Fuel. You can head to properfuel.co and use the code word Misfit to save on all products in all of your orders. We got pre-workout, we got post-workout. Both are based on peer-reviewed research, not only in the ingredients that we use, but the amount that they're in. That, the devil is in the details with the dosage there. You might go to the site and say recovery is out right now, and you're super bummed because you clicked the link and you saw that it's protein, carbs, creatine, leucine, digestive enzymes, electrolytes, all in one package. Well, what we've done while the jugs are being replaced and reordered, supply chains are the coolest thing ever. We are matching the single serve price, which would normally cost you $120, down to the jug price. You can get 40 packets, which is the equivalent of getting a jug for the same price. Properfuel.co. Make sure you go in there, get your pre-workout, stim or non-stim, your 40 single serve packets. Properfuel.co, code word Misfit.
We're also brought to you by Sharpen the Axe. And in case you've been under a rock for the last, few days, and you haven't been on social media, we are in the midst of Sharp Days, effectively the last day of Sharp Days, where everything in the store is 20 to 80% off. There are a lot of hidden gems in there, and if you don't head to sharpentheaxecode.com, you will miss out and have to wait till Black Friday or spring cleaning or whatever our next sale is. So do not miss out. Lots of great stuff in there. Again, 20 to 80% off. You can also save an additional 10%. And I would encourage you to do so by using the code word Keala, Keala. You'll save an extra 10% and we'll donate 10% to that great cause because the trail run is about to happen in the next couple of weeks here. And we'd love to support them. So again, sharpentheaxecode.com. Use the code word Keala, Keala. Check out that Sharp Days sale.
And lastly, we are brought to you by Misfit Athletics and Team Misfit affiliate programming. You can head to misfitathletics.com or the SugarWOD marketplace. Start your 2-week free trial. Jump into week 3, coming up on week 4 of phase 1 as an individual, or this coming Monday, the 5th. Is that, you said that's airing today? So today, today the affiliates are starting affiliate games week. We've got games workouts that we modified for the affiliate level. That's super exciting. And if it's not out yet, I don't know if it will be, but it will be out eventually. The full affiliate games week will be available for anybody to use. So if you're an affiliate gym who doesn't follow the affiliate programming, we're gonna release that for free for everybody here in the coming week or so. So misfitathletics.com for your individual programming and teammisfit.com for your affiliate programming. Back to the show.
So the rest of today's episode is a topic that I feel like we're going to revisit 1 to 3 times a year indefinitely. We can, use some updated science. We can explain some of the nuance. But a lot of times it comes from listening to the community or thinking about conversations that we have with our remote athletes and just making sure that we continue on this podcast and in our content to bounce around to the different places underneath the umbrella of the athlete IQ to make sure that we're not overcorrecting and we're not saying, okay, so if I go in and write down watts, calories per hour, 500 meter split, strokes per minute, all these things, then I don't need to sleep well anymore. Obviously, that's a gross exaggeration, but for me, looking at Discord and seeing some of the conversations about why people would use certain wearables, conversations about can you do conditioning after you're lifting, people talking about when post-workout nutrition should happen, any of these things where there is some science behind it, but it needs to be personalized for what your goals are. That kind of brings us back to a conversation the three of us have been having with gym members and remote athletes for over 10 years. And we've had it with everybody from I want to lose 100 pounds and like save my life to I didn't like my placement at the CrossFit Games. How do we move the needle here? And we've had it with every other iteration along the entire thing because people come up to you and they say, hey, I'm not getting what I want out of my training. And, what I used to use and what I still refer to it as is the other 23 hours. Just this idea of if you are worried about your personal health or you are worried about how you're doing within the gym, but that's just this small piece of the pie in terms of time spent, then we have to look at the other things. We have to go in and say, how do I improve my recovery or my health or whatever it is so that I can get better? And what's nice about this is there's a lot of information to put out there, but it's sort of same iteration, one step at a time. Like what we don't want to happen from this podcast is for you to take rigorous notes and then try to implement every single thing right off the bat. We talk the eggs and baskets thing gets thrown around a lot on the podcast. We still need some baskets and some fake eggs.
Joyce has got you, bro. Don't worry.
We need that. Eggs and baskets tangent. But thinking about where is my attention spread out right now and where can I take certain things and move them around a bit. So basically the goal with this podcast is to come in and say, are you still thinking about these things? Here are some specifics, things that you can think about, things that we've, tried with athletes, potentially tried personally, whatever it is.
When it comes to recovery stuff.
Yep. When it comes to recovery stuff. And what's interesting is what does recovery even mean anymore? You've got things like maffetone is on the list here of recovery. How is that possible? We'll get into that. So the lines get blurred a little bit, and I think they get blurred depending on what your personal goals are.
They get blurred even more with CrossFitters too.
Absolutely.
Because of the nature of the training.
So the first question every time is, how's your sleep, right?
Wait, how come it's not supplements? I thought it was supplements. Which supplements are you taking? That's always the first.
Properfuel.co. Use the code word Misfit.
Like the nice part about having like the physical affiliate is that to me, like that's like the foundational, like this is how you get into CrossFit, right? Every competitor listening to this at some point had to have walked through the doors of a CrossFit gym and hopefully at some point took a class, or took affiliate class for a certain period of time where it's like, hey, you get this 1 hour of fitness and hopefully you were taught what am I going to do in the outside of the gym? Because the part of the CrossFit class isn't getting lunch, right? You're not getting fed and watered and and sleeping and whatnot.
I like that.
You're not getting fed and watered by your coach. And then you get members who like drink the Kool-Aid and they're just like, I want to get stronger. I want to get fitter or whatever it is. I want to do more. And it's almost always the like, what else can I be doing to improve my fitness around the gym when
more volume?
When the conversation, like the first question that a coach will usually ask is like, how's your sleep? Okay, let's dive into what good sleep mean? And I don't even ask how your sleep is anymore. I ask, when do you get in bed and when do you wake up in the morning? Because people well, I get 8 hours of sleep. It's like, no, you don't. I know you don't.
On my phone for 3
You're
hours
lying.
before bed.
Yeah, you're lying. I know you're lying. You don't even know you're lying. I know you're lying. But it's when do you get up? When do you go to bed? What does that look like? When do you wake up in the morning? And we start filling in the other things, because it's like, well, if you're going to continue to dig a hole at the gym, like, what are you doing to fill it in when you get home?
Yeah, the concept here that will come up a lot, and we'll get into what hormesis is, but the idea of a lot of your actions are catabolic. They break you down. Now, if there is no anabolic phase to follow, that is a bad idea.
Just get ground into dust.
Exactly. So exercise, catabolic, sleep, the most anabolic thing there is out there. If you decide to,
get free HGH.
if you decide to head up to Canada and get some supplements, just joke. But you don't sleep well, probably still not going to work, right? So this is the place that we start with people. And what's nice about it is Hunter asked that question first. Then we get to move on down the line. How warm is your room? How dark is your room? What is the air quality like? Do you have a ritual surrounding this? Are you letting your body know that you're going to sleep? Hey, guys.
Hey,
Okay, sorry.
I usually, the first thing I talk about after, I think that's the idea of like, how long are you in bed for is a good place to start. Typically what I ask after that is they tell me their schedule. I said, what do you do to get your body to signal it's ready to sleep?
Yeah.
Because I think that ends up being one of the best ways to teach someone like how your body actually works. Like if you're watching, Game of Thrones on your TV 30 seconds before bed and it's on full volume and it's really bright, and then you try to go lay down, your body's just been like, all right, I was just in I'm under fluorescent lights. I've been told to stay awake. That light is stimulating a part of my brain that says, stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. So going in and saying, what do you do to help get yourself ready for bed is usually where I start after the how long have you been in bed for conversation. And, I tell people early on, this can be something that's as short as 15 minutes before bed, and sometimes it can be up to 2 hours before bed, depending on kind of how you find yourself to wind down. But essentially, when you get ready to go to sleep, things like dimming lights, putting blue light blocking glasses on, maybe considering foam rolling or stretching or meditating. Or if, you're not someone that likes to sit still very well, you can do something very repetitive and kind of boring. This is going to sound like I'm telling you to do chores at your house, because I am. But if you do something like fold laundry before bed, something very repetitive and that's kind of mindless, that can help signal your body all right, it's time to wind down. There's not much more going on today. Let's get ourselves kind of in that cascading effect of all right, this is boring, it's not stimulating, which is exactly how we should be kind of winding down as we get ready into bed. And the biggest thing there is try to be consistent. You might not have laundry to fold every single night, but you can find other mundane tasks. Like maybe it's doing the dishes or letting your dog outside, or, maybe you go through 3 static stretches that you really like before bed, and that helps you go to sleep. But finding habits that you like to do that don't kick you into fight or flight or awake is a great way to go. And I know you've talked to me about it before, but reading a fiction book, something that's not going to get your wheels turning too aggressively, but it's a nice way to kind of wind down from the day. And, if you think back to grade school, most of us read chapter books and we're like 3 seconds into it. This is a great way for some people to help wind themselves down, because that is how you create the habit. When you find something that works for you, you now have the first step in the equation of all right, how do I go from a busy, bustling day to, all right, I need to sleep so I can have another busy, bustling day the following day?
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind there is just people will sort of create excuses for themselves, not knowing that they're attached to the behavior because it's addictive. The dopamine machines they're on the wall, they're in our backpack, they're in our pocket, they're everywhere now. So you can be doing your, sort of mindless scrolling. And if someone was like, are you having a great time right now? You would probably be lying if you said yes. You can't really put 2 and 2 together. Why am I still doing this? And it's because the smartest people literally in the entire world have figured out how to make you do it over and over.
It's funny too. It's pretty obvious too, because how defensive you get too. You're like, yeah, I'm fine. Someone asks you, sitting around the couch, my wife, we're watching a movie or TV show, and we put something on to watch together. And if one of us is paying attention, the other one's on their phone, we give the other one grief. It's like, hey, aren't we watching a movie here together? And they're like, I am. It's like, no, you're not. You're scrolling.
You aren't paying attention to the giant screen. You're looking at the small screen, and it's bothering me. So kicking those behaviors is no different than sugar addiction or something even more serious when it comes to addiction. You got to kind of go cold turkey and just say to yourself, I am going to put my phone in another room when I go to bed, and for like a week, I'm going to think about it. Like my significant other is now in the bathroom. I'm just sitting here, and there's someone's to my left or to my right. And that thing is sitting in the bathroom. So you will have issues with that, but developing that ritual and trying to get back to that place, especially if you are someone who's trying to be a competitive athlete, like your phone has no business being in your bedroom. And, phone is an asterisk, phone, iPad, whatever the fuck you have.
Screen.
Yeah, exactly. The other piece of sleep, real quick, is we prescribe morning movement every day. So just sort of that jolt of like letting your body know that it's awake. It's one of the best things that you can do for your sleep. Preparing for your sleep begins the second that you wake up. And then, the easiest way to think about how sunlight affects our sleep is, let's say, a lot of people experience this on vacation or at a rental house where they're outside more by the lake or whatever it is. People experience this and don't understand how it's possible for them. Their diet's not as good. Maybe they had a couple of adult beverages and they feel fantastic the next day. Part of it is because your internal clock used to, in millions and millions of years of evolution, we used to see the sun in the morning, and then it used to be way up over our head and super bright. And then as the sort of lux changes, as it comes down, the amount of light that's coming out, it's signaling your eyes to start producing melatonin. So the more sort of natural rhythm you develop with what's happening with the sun around you, the better your sleep's going to be. So part of morning movement, we try to get people out into the sunshine while they're doing it. That's really helpful. But seeing the sun like go through its major phases during the day will work absolute wonders for your sleep. And again, one of the reasons why a lot of people sleep like a baby when they're on vacation, whether they're active or not, or whatever it is because they're getting those signals into their eyes throughout the entire day. So there are things that you can do basically at all times to help your sleep.
For that same reason, if you're somebody who has like an office job and you're sitting indoors all day and you're just like, no, I roll great on 6.5 hours of sleep, like, that's a great point to be like, hey, are you getting outside? Can you go for a walk to get that sunlight exposure, as opposed to just sitting under fluorescent lights all day? You get there when it's dark, you go home and it's dark. It's like your body's like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, apparently I don't need to sleep, so I'm not going to.
Next would be on that list is typically nutrition. That's typically where we go with people after that. One of the reasons that's the case is, especially at the affiliate level, is if you are like really battling the blood sugar up and down, the crashes, the highs, the lows, that is bad sleep fucks that up so bad that you are not set up to make decent decisions throughout the day. Now in the sort of conversation of recovery, number one is, are you eating enough food? Especially if you're a high level competitive athlete. It's not that hard to figure out if you're eating enough food or not. When you weigh and measure, you're sort of searching for that calorie number that once you spread it out over the course of maybe a month, you are either gaining weight like you want to, maintaining a similar weight, or losing weight. So if you're not eating enough and you want to gain weight or you want to stay the same, or potentially your body composition is changing in a way that you don't like. Too much body fat is obviously an issue for a high-level competitor, but too low is also a very serious issue for high-level competitors. I think there's been sort of some, I don't know, the wisdom has been pushed around in weird directions within the CrossFit community. You are not at your absolute best when you're the most shredded. Bodybuilders talk all the time about how terrible they feel when they're in that mode. There's a pretty good chance that you're not hydrated well enough. There's a pretty good chance that you're not taking in enough carbohydrate. So we'll just sort of leave that there. But that's a pretty serious place to start, is just knowing that you are eating enough if you're being competitive. Luckily, it's not that complicated outside of this. And we can talk in a second about why, if it's not complicated, why there's nutrition coaches. But protein, most competitive athletes are in the neighborhood of eating 1 gram per pound of body weight a day. Like that's fairly conventional wisdom. Some people trying to put on more muscle mass might be at 1.25. Someone more sedentary might be at 0.75, just so they can have a better mix of macronutrients, whatever it is. But that's conventional wisdom. So if you know that, so if you know your total calorie number, if you know your protein number, you have what's left in calories to split up between carbohydrate and fat. And what is interesting about this topic, and I think just a slight nuance for us compared to maybe someone who came up in a more conventional, dietitian, sort of maybe getting schooling that may or may not be outdated, this idea of balancing carbs and fat. So we definitely need, CrossFitter needs a lot of carbohydrate. High level competitive CrossFitter needs a lot of carbohydrate, and you're really thinking about it from the standpoint of performance. So how am I feeling when I'm going? Am I bonking? If, I'm also a knowledge worker in some way, is my brain, sort of failing me? Glucose is really kind of the main thing that's going to work that in a positive or negative direction. But the other side of it, and I think a thing that people are still scared of, is hormonal balance attached to how much fat you're putting in your body. We need to make sure that when we're using those sliders, that we are personalizing this for ourselves and not because so-and-so eats this way and this other person eats this way. So that could be this other person runs really well on higher fat, is fat adapted because they used to be an endurance athlete, whatever it is. This other person runs really well on high carb, hormones look good, they get their blood work done, they're ready to rock. Don't base your own personal situation on that. At a biological level, people do need to try and figure out on their own what works best for them. Like me personally, I know that when I'm training, I do need to up my carbohydrate a decent amount. But if I drop my fat too low, I can definitely tell that my recovery scores stretched out over time are lower. And, there's a lot of science behind that, fat and cholesterol in terms of turning into testosterone. But not looking for anybody to overcorrect here. I'm just looking for people to find balance.
Yeah, I found that historically when I was doing more of like what Hunter's described as training, like being more of a kind of one and done kind of guy, but still caring a bunch about it, there was a little bit more fat and protein in my diet and a little less carbohydrate because I felt like that might be a healthier way for me to eat. But then I started realizing that sometimes I would get a little bit lightheaded standing up too quickly. And that, means I'm hypoglycemic, which means I don't have enough sugar kind of circulating there. And my body did, I think, a decent job of taking, what I was putting into it and trying to create the amount of glucose I need. But I did notice that certain things, I just didn't have that go to that final gear kind of place when I didn't have the carbohydrate in it. So recently I've been experimenting with a little bit more of it now. Been taking it a little bit more in the drink form because I don't think I could eat the amount of potatoes or rice that I'd want to get down what I need for carbohydrate for the day. And I find that, we always use the car analogy. Like if you don't drive the car, don't put the gas in there. So understanding that first you need to figure out, you educate yourself on what macronutrient amounts look like so you can have a good perspective on prescribing for yourself, then figure out kind of what your baseline is for just your day to day. And then from there, then ask yourself, what is my activity level and how does that dictate, what I put in my body? Because for example, one of the things people have been seeing me do recently is drink a little bit of Gatorade. And it's not something historically I've been really into. And I've been the kind of guy years ago, he asked me don't drink sugar, mostly because the average affiliate member is just coming for that 1 hour of fitness. And
don't drink blue dye.
Is that
that's my problem with it.
Those people coming into the gym are, they're casual exercisers are coming in for 1 hour a day. And that doesn't necessarily justify putting in another 100 grams of carbohydrate in your body just because you worked out for an hour. People are really bad at estimating how much activity, how many calories that actually burned and how much they actually did, and then underestimate how much they're putting back into their body. And because of that, dissociation between those two numbers, it's really easy to accidentally overeat some of those things and not realize that doesn't, what you're putting in for fuel in your body doesn't necessarily equal what you're doing as an output day to day. And, early on, you should experiment. That's part of what's really cool about the nutrition stuff is that you're not going to drastically fuck yourself up if for a few weeks you try a little higher carb or a little higher fat, but you need to be taking notes or, journaling or being aware of how that's what your body's responding with and then experimenting with it. And again, going way back to some of the old CrossFit Journal articles, I talk about that all the time. Without going into the zone diet, it's hey, have you tried figuring out what your macronutrients are and try it for a few weeks and then play around with those sliders a bit based on your activity level and see if you don't feel better, perform better, sleep better, have better energy, better mood. Those are all indications that you're sort of dialed in what you should having in your body day to day.
I think that's probably, when it comes to nutrition, the number one thing that I would tell somebody is, if you have never tracked your food and therefore like weighed and measured it, like, you have to do that. You have to get at least a baseline understanding of what X number of ounces of protein or whatever looks like. What does it look and feel like to eat 400 grams of carbs throughout the day? What is your actual macro breakdown look like? And I'll tell people, like, if an affiliate member, again, very different community than your competitive CrossFitter, but it's like, I'll give somebody macros for free. It's pretty easy. Like you said, it's pretty straightforward. It's mostly the accountability thing that people are looking for. But the first thing I say is, like, I need to see a week of unedited, this is what I put in my mouth for 7 days. And it's not like, you're not trying to game it. You're not trying to look at day one and be like, oh shoot, like, I can't believe I did that. It's like, nope, don't do that. Record exactly what you eat for 7 days, so you actually have a picture that is representative of what you normally do, and then we can learn and adjust from there. And I think you have to have, people have no fucking idea what they're eating is the moral of the story. Yep. And I think once you learn that, then you can also start to think about things like the timing of your nutrition. Is what you're eating at 8:30 p.m. fucking up your sleep? Probably, if it's at 8:30 p.m., unless you go to bed at like 1. But like, all of these things kind of bounce off of each other. So when I'm giving people those recommendations, the first thing is, like, you have to have a baseline knowledge of what you're actually putting in your body.
Yeah, and I think the easiest analogy is, could the most well-adjusted human being ever follow the blog on their own and go to the CrossFit Games? The answer is definitely yes. We don't recommend it. Same concept for nutrition. Having someone in your corner in some capacity, actually hiring a nutrition coach, having a accountability buddy, having a coach at your affiliate, whatever it is, but doing that on your own is not necessarily that easy. One great thing about this wearables conversation that we'll get into a little bit more in a bit is, you can find out how many calories you're burning. I don't know if it's within 10%, 20%, but it's definitely in the neighborhood of how many calories you're burning. And basically just pay attention to that over the course of, let's say a week. If it's a normal week for you, do the average out, start there. Like, it's not that hard to figure out how many calories you're burning if you spread it out. It's the same concept with weighing yourself. Don't even try to figure out what is happening day to day. It's not a good idea. Like, you can go old school, like Google Sheets. I think everyone knows how to type in equals average, but basically, like, weighing yourself over a period of time, finding out what your average weight is, whether it's a week, whether it's a month, whether it's even 3 months, to figure out how you want to manipulate those numbers. So averages of how much you're actually eating and then averages of the weight are going to be a lot easier to manipulate than being obsessed with, I ate a little bit too much or a little bit too less yesterday. How is it even possible? Like I had one of my training runs where I think I lost either 8 or 9 pounds, and I was able to put most of it back on in liquid quickly. Like, the way that this shit works, when you're taking a piss, when you're drinking, how much you're drinking, all of that, more salt, are you retaining the water, are you just peeing it back out? Like, do not get obsessed with the number on the scale from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, trend lines are way more important. That's something I've worked with, clients that are more health oriented in the PT setting. And it's like, they're so excited because they come in and tell me, like, oh, I've lost 1 pound today. And like, I'm encouraging that. I'm like, great. That's great that you're losing some weight. And over time, like, you tell me enough of those days, we're going in the right direction. But I want to be like, it's probably the sip of water you had before you came here. That's the difference. And again, not a bad thing. It's a very good for this person this is their objective, is to try to be healthier. So losing weight is a good thing. But I tell them, like, what you should do, create a journal. Literally write down what you weigh, and let's look at it a month from now and see where the weight actually is, because that's going to be a better indication of like how how what you're doing for nutrition and how you're moving your body is it changing your health for the better. And I think that's a much better representation. I also like to tell athletes, like, potentially throw out a scale and use the mirror as a better test, because your eyes will be a very obvious thing if your body is changing.
Yeah.
And you could step on the scale and weigh the exact same thing. But if you lose 5 pounds of fat and gain 5 pounds of muscle, your scale says the same number. And you're like, I look way different. And that's a good indication.
You also might update that number. Like,
Exactly.
I don't fluctuate that much in weight, but like being like, okay, so I want to weigh 200 pounds, or I want to get down to the like high 180s, depending on what my goals are. Being in that band, I can look very different. And you can sort of adjust, like, oh, why did I want to lose or gain weight in the first place? And then, you know, take a look at yourself and be like, if it is an aesthetic thing, then is that number actually lined up with it? Or is it more just about, you know, my training and getting my nutrition dialed in terms of, you know, balancing things out? The last thing that I think is important to cover is just knowing whether you are a bit more old school CrossFitter, really care about micronutrients, or if it's like, I need hyper palatable food so I can actually get this in, and then I'm relying on supplements, things like a multivitamin, you know, whatever it is, magnesium. There's all kinds of different things that you can take
Greens.
that can definitely help. But just knowing where you're at within that spectrum and not ignoring the fact that your body is going to recognize those micronutrients a lot easier if it is within food. So finding things that you can eat that are more micronutrient rich, or if you're just, you know, if you're that person, if you're like me and Lil Dicky, no fruits and vegetables, and you need to take things like athletic greens and take a look at your blood work, and certain times of the year, it's more vitamin D and magnesium, you know, having your stack ready for, I don't even know what diseases exist anymore, but like flu season, cold season, whatever it is,
Monkeypox
having
season,
your stack ready for, you know, your
COVID
vitamin
season.
C and your zinc and all that stuff. Again, if you aren't the type of person who really pays attention to that micronutrient amount, like, you need to get that no matter what. Your body's going to need to do that for bone density, for, you know, blood flow. The idea of working hard to drive aerobic threshold, you know, to a lower and lower place, and then get that stroke volume up, and then not like getting enough magnesium so like your heart works, seems like kind of a silly thing to do, right? So just paying attention and understanding that these systems all sort of go together.
Yeah, and especially for the like kind of affiliate general health practitioner, just eating real food, especially like stuff that's grass-fed and organic, like you get most of that stuff through food. Like grass-fed organic beef, it's like, I think like pound for pound or calorie for calorie, like the most nutrient dense food you can eat. And I think just eating real food, kind of like, whether it's the stick to the perimeter of the grocery store sort of idea, but eating real food, you're going to get a lot of that stuff naturally. If you're a competitive athlete who's got using more of like, hey, my food is not for enjoyment, this is for fuel, then obviously you might need to kind of seek the vitamins, minerals, or you know, just make sure that you are actually sufficient and all that stuff.
I thought the nutrition chat was over, but I thought of something.
Go on.
This is a sort of a theory hypothesis, and I would want to ask somebody like a longevity doctor or whatever, but this is something that I know Austin was struggling with in changing his nutrition, getting ready for the CrossFit Games, and then at the CrossFit Games. So hear me out, you tell me what you guys think. If the number one predictor of longevity seems to be VO2 max, based on research, if that is the number one predictor, and you are eating very strict, and you know you're eating paleo or whatever it is, you're really all in on that, and you're worried about, you know, how many carbohydrates I'm getting in, and people at a caloric deficit typically actually do live longer, but there's, you know, the whole health span versus lifespan. If you are fueling yourself in a way that is most advantageous to increasing your VO2 max, instead of being in a caloric restriction, getting as many micronutrients as possible, that sort of thing, wouldn't you sort of be canceling that out? If you are eating in a way where you can push yourself physically and mentally more than you would if you were eating healthier, if VO2 max is a better predictor of longevity, isn't there something to be said about making sure that you are really fueling that engine to be able to actually go out and do something about increasing your VO2 max?
This is the can you exercise away a bad diet question. And I
don't think no, it's not. That's not what this is at all. It's someone at a really high level who gets too wrapped up in this idea of I have to eat for longevity. And I think they are doing that in a way that is at the detriment of increasing their VO2 max. This isn't saying, do you go eat the garbage heap? It's, do you make those concessions of things like a Gatorade or, having, people are really weird about the difference between like things like pasta and rice. It's like, I eat pasta that's made of rice. It's literally the exact same thing, but there are connotations. There's just these weird things, connections that people have with it. And I think they get themselves to a place where they aren't able to then go manipulate it. So I'm not talking about like really eating like shit. I'm talking about, I will get those calories in beyond what seems reasonable to me to go in and do that. So knowing for him that he's not going to be able to cram down the amount of calories within, like, I've seen the way he eats when he's eating super healthy, the volume of food that he would need to eat.
Trash bag full of food.
It's impossible. It's close to impossible. So I think there's a give and take there. I really do.
Yeah, I almost want like a university study, because I know what you're talking about. Typically, they have like rats they feed, baseline amount of calories, because that's how much a rat needs every single day to like exist, and then they take like 10% off the top and give the other group like a little bit less. And on average, these rats live longer than those rats, and that says caloric deficit does equal better longevity. Part of me wonders if they maybe even had a third group where it was, we're going to force these rats to exercise, and we're going to give them a diet that's going to allow them to exercise better. Would they then outlive the rats that are given the calorie deficit of whatever, 10, 20%? I don't know if that study's been done. I feel like the chasing performance and giving the athlete the fuel it needs to increase their VO2 max probably comes with unknown side effects. Like, maybe that's like, I don't know the science behind it, like free radicals, or like there's some sort of oxidative breakdown that happens that's causing, maybe a proliferation of cancer cells, because cancer tends to feed on sugar, like type of stuff. So maybe that rat or that person would live longer, but have a higher risk for some things that could potentially chop them down in their prime a little bit more advanced than that athlete that rat, that's getting like the normal diet or that calorie restriction. I don't think I have
the real question, I think what people would be trying to figure out is, what is the best diet to increase your VO2 max? That is probably sort of the end result, but I guarantee that is not the same diet that they would be feeding the people who they're essentially saying, this is the diet in a bubble for longevity. I think those would be two very different diets. And I just want to make sure that people understand that, like, you fueling yourself to go out and get after it and be in the best shape you can be means more than eating perfectly and struggling, being, catabolic forever, within your exercise and within your recovery, and your body's always sort of chasing, getting back into being anabolic outside of sleep.
I always think of that like almost now that crosses spectrum of like sickness, wellness, fitness. It's like, if I push myself so far into fitness and I raise my VO2 the highest level by eating a certain way, do I then buffer myself for a longer time because I might not train this way? But, as my fitness begins to backslide a bit, I have set myself so far to the right now that even though I'm backsliding, I still have a higher level of VO2 max across my lifespan than if I had not done that thing. So it'll be an interesting study. I would tend to believe that chasing performance would lead to more longevity for the average person and the average thing outside of, rare circumstance like I talked about with like, something having maybe a higher incidence of cancer rates because they're eating extra sugar to fuel the performance. But I would think on average, those people that chased fitness to increase their VO2 max and have a little more leeway with their diet would live longer than the people who live either perfectly calorically even or at a deficit.
And his N=1 to me was very easy. He was eating super healthy. He was in a caloric deficit, and his workouts were not going the way that he wanted him to. So it's like, okay, this isn't the right prescription for you specifically. Mm-hmm. And of course you can take it too far, but
yeah, I don't know. I think that makes sense. Like you don't see a whole lot of jacked, super fit old people in nursing homes, so there's a lot to be said
right.
about and I don't know where it ranks on the order of like, indications of longevity, but fat-free or lean body mass is also one of those things. So it's like what factors contribute the most to longevity, and then like is the diet, what diet moves those things up, or is it like because
a lot of the studies, the diet's just in its own little bubble
thing, right?
Yeah,
but I think the problem is like you've got two different variables, right? You got
of course
what is elite performance and what is the correct diet. So
right,
I don't know. That'd be a good study for sure.
I think probably the last thing that we have time for today, and we can potentially do a part 2 to this episode if we need to, is just the sort of the hot cold connection. So there's hot and cold, there's post-workout nutrition, and there's the order of your exercise. And this all plays into a certain ecosystem. And it comes from, again, the conversation about what do we use wearables for? When do I want to do cold and hot therapy? And believe it or not, that goes into the order of your actual exercise. So one of the things that was said in a previous podcast, brought up in a remote coaches meeting, is if your goal is to add muscle, if your goal is to, have your training have some hypertrophy in it, then you probably should not do weightlifting and then intense exercise right after. You should not do
Metcons, you mean?
Yeah.
Like cardio.
Yep. You should not do weightlifting and then like immediately drink your post-workout shake. You should not do weightlifting and then get in a cold tub right after. Now, what makes this such a fascinating conversation is those things that I just mentioned don't do are a must do for most competitors, because their goal is to begin recovery as quickly as possible so that they can go again. Now, that's why I think it's important to have this conversation. There are some athletes that truly need to add muscle mass in the sport. You talked about the concept of having that lean mass. If you just try to gain weight by any means necessary in CrossFit, that's not going to go so well for you. So how am I supposed to do that? It's also very challenging and hard on high-level athletes when they have to do this, because you're supposed to absolutely blast a muscle group and then leave it the fuck alone for 24 to 72 hours, depending on how anabolic you are as a human being. So there's a lot sort of in there. Can you do all your bodybuilding if you're trying to add that mass and, only do the, your C2 bike session or whatever afterwards, because it's not running interference on the tissues in your upper body? So that conversation is complicated, and I just think people need to know why certain things get thrown out there, and how they can make things, sort of work for themselves. So within the hot and cold conversation, we're looking at trying to get athletes, and this is sort of based on some recent stuff. And if you want to read more about it or get into it a bit more, at Susanna Soberg, on Instagram is a really good resource, and some of her research or, data accumulation is where these numbers come from. So 57 plus minutes per week of hot, that's based on a pretty damn hot sauna. So that's 175 to 200 degrees. If you bought a sauna at hardwaresupply.com, and
Who would do
it's
that?
closer to 160 to 170 degrees, you might be looking at, getting, just sort of doing some quick math and knowing that a 20-minute session in this one's probably closer to a 25 or 30-minute session in this one. So obviously, if you have a super hot sauna, it's kind of easy to divide out into probably like 3 days of 20 minutes. if your sauna doesn't get as hot, 3 days of 25 minutes or 3 days of 30 minutes, whatever it is. One thing that's cool about this is if you are in that mode of trying to stay anabolic and trying to really or be catabolic for longer so that you can grow tissue more, you can get done with your weightlifting or your exercise and get right into the sauna, and that's going to push that even further. It's almost like adding another session without doing a lot to your central nervous system or your muscle tissue. But you're pushing out that window of being catabolic again. You're making, your recovery is starting later. So this is something that somebody could do that's closer to the affiliate or hatchet level to sort of bolster their, hey, I don't have the energy to go in and do this many sessions, but I know that I can go sit in the sauna for 20 or 30 minutes afterwards. And that's really going to help
sneaky
me.
way to add on some extra time.
Yep. And
what's the mechanism for that? Do you know why it is that you finish lifting and you get right in a sauna and it seems to enhance that?
It's actually like super simple. It's just that you're staying catabolic for longer.
Got it.
So when you get done weightlifting, typically what someone's going to do, they're going to try to get a cool down in, and then they're going to try to get their post-workout nutrition and get after it. Some basic, luckily there are bodybuilding PhDs and powerlifting PhDs, and they've figured out that I can extend this window essentially by waiting. And they sort of know when being catabolic for too long is an issue. So that's where a lot of the wait to drink your protein shake an hour after exercise comes from. That is to maximize hypertrophy. So we can go anywhere from drinking that shake basically once we get back into rest and digest after your 12 to 15 minute cool down that you should be doing after everything. Boom, you can have that protein shake and be good to go. Just want to make sure that you're slowing down enough to actually be able to digest it all the way out to that 1 hour period. And again, that's about sort of stretching out that window of breaking down tissue on purpose. If your body, you're continuing to stress your body out on purpose to get into that place. The cool thing is if you're not worried about hypertrophy, your body can get stronger and not get bigger. So don't worry too much about that. Don't get too obsessed with that.
Thank goodness.
That's what you're worried about?
I was pretty worried.
Just a reminder with all of this, hormesis is this idea of stressing ourselves on purpose in a very specific prescription to then come out the other side stronger. Dose specific, just like with any supplement, with any drug, whatever it is, with exercise, the amount that you do we have to enter back into that phase where we're recovering or it doesn't count. So if you do, 7 20 to 30 minute sessions a week, that's going to be too much. Also, your body's going to start to adapt and not get the benefits from it, the cascading hormones. Those are going to continuously drop down if this is something that you're doing over and over and over.
Same conversation of, doing more exercise volume isn't going to make you a fitter person. It's a very similar corollary here. So, the thing I hear from you over here is that if you do these sessions, like remind yourself that pretend like you just did an additional training piece. How would you behave in your recovery different? Having done an extra training piece versus not. This is no different here. Now, what's great is you're not going to have that CNS damage or maybe sore muscles the same way you would otherwise, but everything else needs to be on par. So that might mean you eat more protein and carbohydrate. You hydrate more afterwards. You spend more time, breathing slow to get yourself out of fight or flight. But, I think that people are going to get really excited about, oh, cool, I can get really strong, and then not do the necessary steps to make sure this doesn't create maybe an overstimulation and create hormesis that is now just more stress that's going to take you in the wrong direction versus the direction you're trying to go.
It's important to just throw out there that you all already know what hormesis is. You're exercisers. You beat yourself up on purpose in a prescribed way and then can realize when you are coming out the other side stronger or fitter or whatever. That is hormesis. We're just applying that same concept to you're stressing yourself out in a sauna or in an ice bath, whatever it is. The prescription for the cold is kind of interesting because it's subjective cold. And that gets back to your body adapting to these things, getting more and more used to it. So 11 plus minutes per week broken out into separate sessions of subjective cold is where you really start to see the benefits here. Again, same concept as hormesis. More is not better, both because you'll be too stressed and because you'll stop seeing the benefits from it because your body is subjectively isn't really all that cold anymore. you don't want to get to the point where you have to be in a serious ice bath for 10 minutes at a time. Like, you don't need to be doing that to yourself. So we already talked about hot following exercise can continue the benefits of exercise, but you're remaining catabolic. So if you're worried about recovery, if you're worried about getting ready for that next session, potentially not the best idea. Maybe it is tacked on to your final session, that sort of thing, because you're going home and you're doing all your routines and all this different stuff. Cold following exercise is very interesting because one of the main reasons, and some scientists essentially put it in a bubble and say it's like the only reason, we don't start recovering at an elevated body temperature. Our body's job in that moment is to lower it. So if you lower it for itself, if you go get into cold water, not an ice bath, just something that is going to drive that temperature down, but not have that like massive hormetic stressor, you are going to be able to recover a lot faster. It's why you always saw Fraser with his hands. There's 3 spots on your body: your palms, your forehead, the bottom of your feet. Those are the places that don't have the same, skin with hair follicles and everything like that. I've seen a few dudes with some hair follicles on their forehead. But those places are the places that can truly drive down your core temperature. So the people that do it on the upper back or the top of the head, it's not going to work as well. Luckily, when you just submerge your entire body, you are taking care of that whole situation. And it's why your hands hurt a little bit more while you're doing that. So that's something that should be in the toolbox of every serious athlete. How do I get my core temperature back down? When we shift over to the ice bath, that's a totally different kind of equation here. We're really lucky here. I don't know what it is. The water that comes out of that hose out there is cold as fuck. That is the coldest tap water I've ever felt in my entire life.
Yeah, we had Roy up visiting for our games week. He's like, is this the water that comes out of the tap?
It's crazy.
This is like
I love it.
30 degrees colder than it used to be.
I don't know how the pipes ended up being buried that far underneath the ground. I don't get it, because it's city water. And I've had that same city water at my house when I used to live in Portland. It's not that cold. Mm-hmm. And it's even colder than the well water, which I didn't know that was possible. So thumbs up to the Portland Water District near the Riverside Golf Course. So when it comes to the actual ice bath, I'm looking for an athlete to get that work done on rest days for sure. We can get into some of the contrast stuff. You can do the, 15 minutes in the hot into 3 minutes in the cold, 15 minutes in the hot, 3 minutes in the cold, whatever your prescription is. But if we're trying to use that as a stressor to, really get that stress response, I don't want that happening for most athletes especially someone with a higher volume. I don't need that to be thrown
enough time in a day to accomplish all those things and to make sure that you're doing what you need to do so that doesn't, again, kick you out of the whole point of hormesis. At what point does hitting yourself in the head with a hammer a 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th time in the day knock you out? You need like 25 more.
Yeah. So with the ice baths, I mean, if it's a real ice bath, people looking to accumulate between like 1 and 3 minutes in there. And then if you start to acclimate, we might bump that up into the 3 to 5 minute zone. But a true ice bath is something obnoxious. Like, to get down to that temperature, it's like, I don't know, 100 pounds of ice. It's a lot. It's a lot of ice. I'd have to go back and look, but it's like not filling a trough with ice, but bag after bag after bag. It's like $40 worth of ice, if that helps you. And then, you're in that for that period of time.
One thing I've found that personally I hate the cold tub. I'm gonna be honest. I'm not someone who's super tough in the cold tub, but if you get in there, you start to feel like you're acclimating to the water. If you just move your body parts around just a little bit to create some circulation in the tub, all of that water that was against your body that's starting to warm up a bit, then swirls with all of the colder water that's in the tub as well. So again, I'm not saying this is a perfect way to create this cold adaptation for a long time, but if you are someone who starts to settle in there,
it's a great hack. It's why cold tubs and like training rooms, the water moves. Yeah, your body perceives it as much colder, therefore it is.
Yeah, and again, that's what we talked about early on, being subjective mattering more than the exact degree that you're at. So,
sure.
If you get in there and you're like, oh, this isn't quite cold enough for me, but it was when I first got in, move your limbs around a little bit and see how you feel.
If you are trying to get the benefits from this, you always end on cold. Your body, you going in and heating your body back up immediately is getting rid of a lot of the benefits. Your body is coming in and heating itself back up, and that's a lot of what the benefit is to doing that. So end on cold, and then if you are adding the stressor of being dehydrated to the sauna, like fucking forget getting the benefits from it. You will not enter back into an anabolic state. It will be a problem. So
Into a raisin.
drink a bunch of water before you go in the thing, drink a bunch of water after. If you cannot survive in there, potentially bring some water in with you. That is better than just beating yourself into the ground and not being able to do that. I think the last thing that I'll say about the hot and cold is it's really kind of fascinating that we are, whether it's in your personal life or in training, we are increasing our threshold for stress and therefore delaying the stress response for longer. That moment in a Metcon when you panic, how long or how fast you can go in a math session before your heart rate gets to a certain place, how quick your trigger is in your personal life with dealing with certain things. The more that you learn to delay your stress response, to sort of build up that stress muscle, the more it's going to show up in different places. This idea of impulse control or panic within a Metcon, whatever it is, can be changed a ton by putting yourself in stressors like that. And there's something a little bit more cerebral about being in there just because you're not doing anything else. Exercise is a stressor where this is the thing that I'm doing. I'm very focused on it. You can kind of get lost in it. Pretty hard to get lost in the ice bath of the sauna. You're there. Like you're definitely there and you're feeling it, and you're either going to succumb to like, I don't want to be in here anymore, fuck this, or you're going to be like, maybe I can do it and sort of deal with it that way.
And my final thoughts kind of transcend over to Hunter's t-shirt there, everything on purpose. Like understand if you do decide to do any of these things that we talked about today, start with a few of them, don't try to implement them all, and ask yourself, why is the reason that I'm doing this? And if you aren't starting with sleep first and you're trying to immediately go to hot and cold exposure, you might want to backtrack and think about the things that, these things, without having a perfect hierarchy, like you can still improve your fitness if maybe your sleep is something that you haven't quite dialed in, but you've all of a sudden now starting to pay attention to your nutrition. Still worthwhile endeavor, but start with the things that are lower barrier to entry. You don't have to buy a $5,000 sauna or spend $300 setting up your cold tub, or if you want to get really fancy with it, you can get one of those super fancy ones that's like 10 grand. Start with sleeping enough. Start there first, create rituals, check off the lower barrier to entry boxes, see how they improve, your overall fitness. And once that happens, then considering layering on new things. And again, not going at this idea all at once is a really easy way to see, all right, how does this one change improve me? Versus if I make 6 changes at once, you don't know which one is the one that's causing you to feel better. It's a much more systematic and a much more effective way to kind of tinker around with yourself and figure out what things actually move the needle for you versus like, I don't know, I did 17 new things, so I don't know which one's the one that's causing me to feel better.
My final thoughts are to start with the basics. If you're like, okay, I'm going to go buy a cold tub. I sleep 6.5 hours a night. Like, you're doing it backwards. I think you have to start with the basics, and by basics, I mean the sleep and nutrition that we talked about early on. Like if you're starting to, again, if you're trying to look for I got these Normatec boots, I got this, that, and the other.
They got Normatec on the go now. Did you see that thing?
You can walk with them?
They got you put it on a specific area and then hit the cell phone going. I think they're doing well because it's John Morant and Patrick Mahomes and those guys
are cheap. Patrick Mahomes is cheap.
Yeah, $15.
If you're springing for the cool tech, but don't know what your macros look like and don't sleep, 8-9 hours a night.
Yep.
Sleep, not in bed. You're actually sleeping that long. You have to start there.
A little preview for the next episode. That'll be my final thoughts. So, the effects that warming up, cooling down, rest days, active rest days, static stretching, mobility, stress management. We're going to get into that stuff, and it's just as important, especially on a personalizing level. So if you liked this episode, make sure you tune into the next one. And then if you are watching on YouTube, sure, but I'd like you to slide up your right sleeve. No.
Right.
What is that on your wrist?
I think it says WHOOP.
We're going to talk about Whoop a little bit in the next episode. The He-Man Whoop hater over there in the corner wears that thing every day and sends me screenshots of his data from it. So there might be a little bit more nuance to this conversation.
Definitely is.
It's not a heart rate monitor. I don't think that's what it was intended for. So everyone just calm the fuck down and get a heart rate strap and use that for something else.
And we'll see.
All right, ladies and gents, make sure you tune in to part 2 of the personalizing your recovery. We'll see you next week.